Hey, Greg, thanks for joining the show today. Can you give us
Hey,
a quick background on your history in UX research?
yeah, and happy to be here, Alex. Thank you for having me on.
Of course.
My history in UX research, I came out of graduate school in 2011 with an MFA in design, and my thesis project was on UX research. I'd been a designer before that and then a design professor, but in grad school, I kind of discovered this new field that was really everything I liked about design, which is understanding why we're designing in the first place. How do we figure out if a product is going to be successful, and then how do we measure against that? Uh, so I really focused my thesis project on UX research, ended up in a role at MailChimp as a UX researcher,
Mhm.
and spent 4 years there, first as an individual contributor and then as a research manager building up a team. I did 4 years at Vox Media as their first UX researcher, and
Okay.
then again scaled up a team there. And today I am at Webflow, where I'm lead user researcher, working with a research coordinator, and again, scaling up a practice and a team.
Awesome. Thanks for that background. And we're huge users and proponents of Webflow. Could you describe what that tool is and where you think it's heading for people that might not be as familiar?
Yeah, so the shorthand answer is Webflow is like Squarespace for professional designers, but it's a no-code product. No code meaning if you're a designer and you learn how to use the platform, you don't have to have an engineer or a front-end developer help you make your website. All the tools that you need to launch a website and sell products or sign up people to a mailing list, whatever you need, it's all there. You don't have to know how to do any programming to make that happen. So it's really a tool for democratizing website development and making it accessible for anyone.
What's your kind of impetus now, heading up research there? What's on the roadmap and what are you planning to do?
Yeah, so one of Webflow's core behaviors is to start with customers. So there's already a hunger at Webflow. I just started a few weeks ago, but research has been happening for a couple of years, that the product has grown. Every PM and designer tries to talk to customers and interview them, test out ideas. But when it's not your job, it's really easy for research to take a back seat or to be, I guess, minimized. And so I'm there to help put best practices in place, put the tooling and infrastructure in place to help everyone do research, and then help everyone make better decisions and really make sure that the user voice is part of our product design process, our support process, uh, just really making sure that the user voice is reaching everybody in the organization. So that's what I'm trying to do. And maybe if we check back in a year, I'll let you know how it's gone.
So, Greg, you just released a book titled Research Practice. I'm presuming about UX research and the practice of that. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and what motivated it and what we should check out within it?
It's actually an action adventure tale about a detective. No, you were right. It is about research practice.
That's your next.
So that's my next book. Yeah, exactly. The sequel. So I was a designer for a number of years. And when I had been freelancing for a while and doing everything wrong, a book came out by designer Adrian Shaughnessy called How to Be a Graphic Designer Without Losing Your Soul. And it wasn't about like how to set up your files or how to
Yeah.
come up with a concept. It was about the business of being a graphic designer and how to do things right, how to be a professional. And as a UX researcher, like there's plenty of books about how to run usability tests, how to do user interviews. There's not a book that tells you how do you get into this field, how do you grow a team, how do you circulate research around an organization, and where do you go next?
Yeah.
So I started to write that book a few years ago based on a conference talk I gave that was really about how to make research practical for every organization. What I realized though is the book was based on my experiences, which weren't really representative of what it's like to do research at Google or Amazon or in healthcare. So
Hmm.
I open sourced it. I invited a number of other researchers to share their perspectives. I
Oh,
sent out
cool.
a survey asking researchers to answer some short answer questions to get even more feedback. And then I worked with an editor to really condense it down into a book that talks about the end-to-end experience of being a UX researcher, from getting out of school and deciding to go into this field to being a senior director and then wondering where do you go next once you've kind of reached the top of the profession. So it's the book I wish I had, back in 2012 when I was starting at MailChimp, and it came out last month. And I really think of it as, something that's a field guide to user research for people who do my job.
Gregg, where do you think this field's headed? Everything's changed to remote, obviously, but what's next in UX research from your perspective?
So I think there's a couple of perspectives here. Because we are remote, it used to be that remote was the rare case. Most people would go do in-person interviews. When I was at MailChimp, we did a lot of field studies. So we'd go visit our users and spend a lot of time with them. Now there's so much, we were kind of forced to adopt Zoom and other tools like that to do interviews. We're doing a lot more remote usability testing. So I don't think that's going to go away. And I think evidence of that is the number of research tools that are being launched. It seems like every week there's a new research platform for doing your own unmoderated studies or for managing participants or recruiting participants. So that's a trend I don't see stopping. I think we're going to see more and more tooling that is created specifically for researchers. The other trend, though, is I see research becoming more valuable outside of product teams, outside of design teams in the future. Researchers are the ones who are asking questions and getting closer to users. And so I think researchers are better positioned to help not just product leaders and design leaders make better decisions, but CEOs and COOs. Who better than a researcher to say, if you're thinking about the next few years of the organization, this is the kind of work we could be doing. These are the kind of questions we should be asking. And this is how research can help you kind of chart a roadmap that's actually based on evidence and not guessing.
What advice would you have for new entrants to the field or people trying to get into the UX research field?
So much good advice, or maybe not good advice, but I have advice. One is you really have to know the business. You have to understand the business. So it's one thing if you are a gifted researcher and you can run interviews and you can develop a rapport and you write good reports and you create great videos or slide presentations. If you cannot connect all of that to why your company exists and what the CEO is measured on, or how they measure their success, you are doing a disservice as a researcher. Like, you have to tie it back to the bottom line. Understand it. It always it amazes me, like, not every researcher understands how your business makes money. Like, you have to understand, how do you make money? Like, what is the revenue model? Because it can be challenging sometimes. Like in media, it's about ad revenue. For a nonprofit, it might be about donations or growing the user base. And at Webflow, it's paying customers. Like, it's a product that charges money. So I think you have to understand that this is still a business, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit. You have to know that. I would also say that it is all about communication. Like, you have to be able to tell a story to your users, to your colleagues. So being able to write, being able to speak, being able to translate tons of data into stories that you could tell and scenarios that you can relate to other people is crucial. So know how to communicate and know how your organization makes money. Like, those are the two biggest things I would impart to somebody entering the field.
I always see anecdotes beating out research just because someone tells a powerful story and it sticks and it resonates. How do you fight that?
So I had a former manager at Vox who, in a conversation, we talked about the idea of an ambient awareness of research. And the idea is you are telling those user stories as a researcher yourself so often and all over the place, in every channel, in every conversation, that people can't help but, I guess, ingest the real stories. So I also believe, though, like, there is value in somebody sharing that story. Like, if you know your product well enough and you know your users well enough, you're going to hear stories that resonate with you, that you want to share with people. And you just know fundamentally, like, based on my knowledge and based on my knowledge of users, this story is meaningful. So I don't want to discount that.
Sure.
What I would say is it's an opportunity to say, oh, that's a really great story. Let's dive into that. And let's see if it's true across all of our user segments. Let's see if it's still relevant or if it's kind of outdated. But getting back to the idea of ambient awareness of research, I am constantly sharing findings in Slack channels, in Google Docs, in Dropbox paper, like wherever people are seeing information, I'm making sure that the real user stories that come from research are represented there so that other stories that, like you said, are anecdotes, they don't spread if they're not quite accurate or useful. Just make sure that you are constantly pushing out research in those channels where people will see them. A mistake I often see is people create this new place where research lives, like it's a special URL or it's a special piece of software that's only for researchers. Nobody's going to go there. Nobody will ever find that stuff.
Yeah.
It might look great and be functional for the researchers. Nobody's ever going to see it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just put it where people actually go.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Greg, and we'll definitely check out the book.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on here. This was a lot of fun.